This edition of Tech Talk is brought to you in part by Telex, the interconnection company, owners and operators of 56 Marietta, the most network-rich co-location facility in the Southeast. Tag TV and Tag Radio. Technology now has a voice of innovation and information. Get it on www.tagtvonline.com.
A look at the technology talent marketplace of the future from both employee and corporate employers. The diversification of approaches and processes for recruiting strategies in the new millennium. Aligning the right tools and the right strategies with clients and future requirements. Does performance, loyalty, and long-time commitment still matter in knowledge-based industries of the future? Quality and speed do matter, but meeting the client's needs is the ultimate solution to tomorrow's recruiting success. Greetings, everyone, and welcome to a very special edition of Tech Talk with Technology Association of Georgia President Tino Mantella. I'm your guest host, Frank Baia. From low-tech suggestions to high-tech tips, the focus of today's Tech Talk is all about recruiting strategies, innovation, and trends in the 21st century as we gain the insights of Tim Smith, President of Thompson Technologies. Responsible for overall business development and delivery efforts for the company, Tim heads up all planning, development, and strategic implementation. An industry and community leader, Tim serves as president of the Georgia chapter of TechServe Alliances and manages the Atlanta CXX group of by-invitation-only exclusive C-level execs who provide professional network and best practice sharing. Thousands of clients, thousands of companies. Just how do you make the perfect match? The job search and the recruiting strategies of the new millennium, going it alone or with proven professional expertise. And forget the future, what about today? How about the next 12 months? Increase in employment contracts or the continual rising of the numbers of unemployed? Up to the Tech Talk on recruitment in the new normal and beyond. Top industry exec, community leader, and long-time Thompson Technologies leading senior executive, Tech Talk speaks with Tim Smith, President, Thompson Technologies. Tim, welcome to Tech Talk.
Good morning. Thank you so much.
Well, we've seen some improvement in recent numbers in January, the moving from 10% in December to 9.7% in January. I think every little bit helps, but let's talk a little bit about the unemployment percentages and how does it affect the kind of business that you are in with Thompson Technologies?
Well, Frank, as you know, the pendulum that swings between the number of available candidates and the number of open requirements is very rarely perfectly aligned. That's why our clients depend on us to ensure that we've got the right recruiting approach, process, methodology all the time, regardless of what the unemployment rate is. With a large number of candidates that are currently available, we are needing to apply more resources to every open opportunity that we have to ensure that we are finding the best. And we've had to implement a dynamic sourcing strategy to complement our recruiting strategy to handle the increased volume and better deliver the right candidate for when our clients need it, and, of course, within their budget.
Let's mine a little bit into that.
Sure.
Obviously, you represent, and to a degree, I guess, both sides, right, of the equation. I mean, you're also looking to get candidates for clients that are looking for good talent. Talk a little bit about that perspective. Is this a good time to, say, hire talent? And I guess I hate to put it out this way, but from a more competitive standpoint, literally at a lower price?
That's a good question. Companies are definitely limiting spending on unneeded expenses, but they also obviously now more than ever need to focus on effectiveness. To answer your first question, this is a good time to hire, but companies are still needing to pay people what would be considered fair and appropriate. What we're finding, Frank, is that if companies do try to hire talent at a lower price, they risk turnover and certainly other expenses from rehiring, retraining, that type of thing.
Now, the evolution and the acceptance of, I'm going to say, contracts rather than, say, the traditional long-term employment, drifting into a space I'm not really that knowledgeable about, but certainly we hear about a lot of dynamics in terms of how hiring is done now. Outtasking is done certainly with things like technology applications and that kind of work. But I guess what I'm talking about, I had a case just recently where my son was in a fender bender, but he ended up in a hospital, and we were in an emergency room. And I know this isn't your field, but it's kind of a metaphor, but I was floored. I was talking to the emergency room people. They were outsourced. I was talking to the doctors. They were outsourced. I mean, I began to realize that the hospital itself was a building, and all of the individuals that were there were not necessarily related to that particular organization, the hospital that it represents. Is that something in your field that you're seeing more of?
There is certainly more diversification, if you will, of approaches and processes for recruiting strategies that companies like mine are using. And we've tried several of them, Frank, but what we have found is that the quality and the control over the process is too important to us. And making sure that we're aligning the right tools and strategies with the clients and requirements that we're needing is important. And the best answer that I could give is that it's important to have more than just one of those tools. We certainly have processes similar to that, depending on the client requirements and needs that they're expecting from us. But primarily, no, we don't do a lot of outsourcing at all.
So things like performance still matter, loyalty still matters, and they're related to the kind of permanent norm, the traditional, I would say traditional, hardly, I don't know if we can use a term like traditional anymore in this ever-changing new normal that they constantly talk about. But I'm glad you bring that up, because what you're talking about is the fact that you really can't afford to make mistakes, and you don't have the time to reinvest, and that it's really better to make the right decisions up front, get the right people, put them in the right places, and then hence get the kind of deliverables that you're really looking for.
You got it. Quality and speed and certainly matter, but so do ensuring that we're meeting our clients' needs. So we employ here several different strategies to make sure that we're best supporting our clients.
Well, we're talking a little edgy here in terms of kind of new economy stuff. What about social media? Are there any challenges to using social media for recruitment?
Any challenges for recruiting? Well, I think first you need to understand what social networking tools the targeted candidates that you're looking for are using. It's easy to find out, but you need to ask the questions. And the primary challenge that I see in my role is managing the amount of time being spent with the various tools. It could easily become a huge time sink. I think the biggest tip that I typically provide to my team is that to be deliberate and be purposeful in where you're spending your time and ensure you're using the best tool for the type of position that needs to be filled.
And now a little bit about the innovative methods that a candidate can use other than social media to make themselves known. What would you guys recommend, or do you actually have a program in which you bring that to some of the value addeds that you present to a client from a candidate's focus?
Well, let me throw out a couple of low-tech suggestions for innovative techniques. I think most people know it's a full-time job looking for a job. Mm-hmm. And customizing the objective in the resume is one thing that a candidate can do to stand out from the voluminous number of resumes that are being sent. Making sure that they've got a very clear program in place for which companies that they've sent in applications or sent resumes for, and then following up in 2 days just to thank them for reviewing the resume, and then 2 days later reach out to them again and let them know what research they've found and why they're interested in interviewing them. When they do have an interview, bringing a portfolio of accomplishments after an interview, doing a handwritten thank you note, following up with references, those types of things. Some of the basic things, Frank, people have gotten away from, I should say, and those things still make a difference.
Now, can you narrow it down, maybe a top 3 or 4, but see if you can target in on what is the one reason that recruiters reject a candidate, and can it be based solely on a resume?
It's a great question. Well, fortunately or unfortunately, a lot of recruiters do make decisions purely on a resume, and usually when people are making that path, it's because of typos and grammatical errors. I think recruiters probably feel that it's a reflection of the quality of work and professionalism. Also, the general format. A lot of times candidates will try to cram too much information into a tiny font onto a single page with no space. And a 2-page resume is fine, especially if you have 10 or more years of experience. But just a general format and editing of a resume, I would probably say, is the number one reason.
So, once again, the details matter. I think a lot of times, especially if you're going alone, you have a tendency to not necessarily spell check, and one would think you'd want to do that, especially in the case of a resume, and yet something like that could really, right from the get-go, get you put aside in a stack that said not interested.
That's exactly right.
Now, talk about, as we are just running a little bit out of time here, but go into a little bit about the benefit of doing it alone versus doing it with an organization like Thompson Technologies. I mean, obviously one's going to believe that you're going to come from that perspective, but I would think today it's almost impossible. I can't imagine someone actually being able to handle a job search by themselves.
Well, they do, and a lot of it has to do with depth and exposure. Thompson Technologies, for example, operates across the full IT life cycle, and we work with consultants that have every bit of experience from CRM, ERM, and SCM to application development to production support, data centers, business intelligence, that type of thing. And over 90% of the professionals deployed by Thompson Technologies are at the expert level. We recently received our client consultant scorecards, which is a process that is part of our quality control program. And very proud that, again, we scored in the top 95% with our client and consultant satisfaction ratings. But that really doesn't answer your question. The reason why candidates will work with somebody like Thompson Technologies is because we work with hundreds of different companies. We represent hundreds of different types of opportunities. And we are just as concerned about doing the right thing for our candidates and finding them the right opportunity as we are finding the right candidate for our clients. And a lot of people, when they're out of work right now, don't have a whole lot of time. The ramp-up time is to find that next opportunity is much smaller than it has been in the past. And so getting exposure to just a volume of opportunities and have somebody that's going to be candid about things like your resume and also not overpromise in what they can do in terms of your search is an important partnership to have.
Now let's maybe go for a close here from a hopefully a positive note. Look out. I'd hazard to guess looking out any more than 12 to 18 months, but over the next couple of years, is this the situation? I guess what we're in now is, we joke about it, but is it the new normal? Is it going to be sort of like this from now on, or do we see it back to a boom period? Or just from your perspective, being, I'm going to say, out on the front lines, with both the sensitivity of the candidates and the clients that you're dealing with, do you get a sense that there's any kind of trend or pattern happening here, or is this a glitch? I call it the recent unpleasantry, that kind of a thing, and that hopefully this cloud will be lifted. But there's also a lot of people who say that, just maybe it won't go back to the way it was, but it'll go back to something new and different that we haven't seen before.
I think new and different is probably the right term. Over the last 12 months, a lot of the companies that we were working with, Frank, had lost confidence in their own forecast. A lot of the opportunities that we started seeing were from new companies. But we didn't go anywhere. We continued to let our existing clients know that we cared about them, we're on standby, and now they're starting to hire and start to give us requirements again. And so I would say that over the next 12 months, we'll start to see an increase, a slight increase in the amount of types of contract opportunities that we're seeing. I think companies are still being very careful in terms of their full-time investments when they're bringing in those. But Thompson Technologies offers an extensive guarantee on both of those, so we're starting to see increases on both sides, which is nice.
Well, I guess, and at the risk of sounding a little patronizing, knowing your guys' background and the commitment that you have to faith-based direction and so much good work that you've done in the community, and for as long as you've been doing what you've been doing, what I'm really hearing is that in the midst of kind of stormy weather, whatever the changes are, up, down, or whatever happens to be in the future, the fact of the matter is, like you say, you're there and you're a constant amid some of the turmoil. So one would think that's a pretty good place to start from both sides, whether you're a client or a candidate. If you're not already there, you're going to want to be, and if it isn't Thompson, it'd be someone else. But my guess is, based on your performance and reputation, you're going to be the one that people are going to be looking for. Tim, thank you so much for joining us today on Tech Talk.
Great to be here, Frank. Thank you so much.